I always believed that the land you work with your own two hands becomes part of you. You don't just live on it, you breathe with it, grow with it, hurt with it, and heal with it. My family's farm in Willow Creek had been in our name for 4 generations, long before property lines were drawn by surveyors who never set foot on the soil they mapped. My grandfather always said, "Land doesn't lie." But people, well, that's another story. For years, that was just a wise old saying, until the day it became my reality. It started with a long week. My farm took a beating from a sudden hailstorm, and the repairs were enough to keep me working from sunrise to well past sunset. On one particular Saturday, I had left early in the morning to make a supply run 2 towns over. Across those 10 hours, I couldn't shake a strange feeling, the kind you get when something is off, but your mind can't name it yet. When I finally returned, dust kicking behind my truck as I drove down the long gravel road to my property, I saw something that made my blood turn cold and hot at the same time. 3 unfamiliar SUVs were parked inside my fence line. My fence line, like they belonged there. My heart thumped, not out of fear, but offense. My property was sacred. Nobody stepped on it unless I invited them. And certainly not some random strangers who, from first glance, looked like they carried clipboards, vests, and attitudes as heavy as their oversized sunglasses. As I got closer, I noticed the freshly installed sign near my gate, HOA Enforced Area. HOA. The word itself was enough to make any landowner's blood pressure spike. The nearest HOA was over a mile away from my farm, ruling over a newer subdivision where the houses looked identical enough to confuse even a GPS. I slammed the truck door and marched toward them. One of the women, mid-50s, short blonde hair, and the expression of someone who'd spent her life criticizing things, stepped forward. "Sir," she said, holding up a hand like she was stopping traffic. "You can't park here." I blinked. "Park? Lady, I live here." She straightened her vest and gestured toward the others. "We've received complaints. You've been storing equipment that violates HOA guidelines. We warned you twice." I stared at her, stunned. "You've warned me? On my own land? I'm not even in your HOA." She gave a smug smile, the kind that tells you the argument has already happened in her mind and she believes she's won. That's what everyone says when they're in violation. Your address falls under our expanded perimeter. New zoning rules. "No," I snapped. "It doesn't. And I know because I checked the boundaries myself. My family's deed is older than your entire subdivision." Another man from their group came closer. He was tall, wearing a polo shirt with the HOA emblem embroidered like it was some military badge. "You're going to have to remove all non-approved structures within 48 hours, he said, tapping on some digital tablet. "Or the association will have to take corrective action." Corrective action. Those words were a gunshot inside my head. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mark, my old friend from my military days, a Marine who had served 2 tours and retired only a year ago. He was in town visiting family and said he planned to swing by the farm that afternoon. And thank God he did. The HOA people didn't leave. They spread out over the property, taking pictures, jotting notes, behaving like trespassing was a sport they'd trained for. My fists clenched hard enough that my nails bit my palms. I tried reasoning. I tried explaining. They didn't care. Then things escalated. One of the men walked up to my storage barn and tried to pull the lock. That was it. "Step away from my barn," I yelled. He didn't. In fact, he smirked. "HOA inspectors have right of access in cases of suspected noncompliance." "No, you don't," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut wood. "Not here. Not ever." He opened his mouth to respond, but that's when the unmistakable rumble of a motorcycle echoed across the land. "Mark." He rolled up slower than he usually did, taking in the scene with narrowed eyes. Tattoos peeked out from his sleeves, and the gravel crunched beneath his boots as he dismounted with that calm confidence only someone trained for chaos could have. "I missed something?" he asked, scanning the group. "This is a restricted area." HOA Karen snapped at him before I could speak. Mark raised one eyebrow. "Lady, this is private land. And he's the owner." She puffed up. We have documentation. No, you don't, Mark said flatly. Because if you did, you'd know this property isn't under your jurisdiction. The clipboard man stepped forward. Sir, this is none of your concern. Mark took one slow step toward him. Not threatening, just reminding him that some people shouldn't be pushed. I'm making it my concern. The HOA group visibly tensed, but the leader woman kept going. We warned the property owner of violations. This entire area falls under our authority. Mark's eyes sharpened. You're trespassing. And you're interfering with private property. Both illegal. She hesitated for the first time. But before the situation could calm down, the clipboard man did the stupidest thing possible. He reached for the barn lock again. Mark moved. Not violently. Not aggressively. Just decisively. He placed himself between the man and the barn, his posture perfectly straight and controlled. Don't touch the barn. Don't touch anything here. You don't get to walk in and pretend you run this place. The HOA guy scoffed. Or what? You'll stop us? Mark's expression didn't change. Yes. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. And something about that simple truth must have triggered some sense of self-preservation in the man, because he stepped back. But the leader wasn't giving up. We're calling law enforcement. Do it, Mark said. They stared, waiting for him to back down. He didn't. I felt something shift inside me. For the first time that day, I felt steady. Mark wasn't just protecting my barn, he was reminding me who I was. A landowner. A grown man. A descendant of people who had shed sweat on this soil when the HOA lady's ancestors were probably arguing over fabric patterns. I pulled out my own phone. Sheriff Carter, I said when he picked up. Tom, everything okay?
No.
I have a group of people trespassing, claiming authority they don't have. I need assistance. There was a long exhale on the other end. On my way. Within 15 minutes, a patrol truck pulled up. The HOA members stood straighter, like reinforcements had arrived for them. But when Sheriff Carter stepped out, the first thing he said was, I thought you people were told last month not to come onto private property outside your jurisdiction. My jaw nearly hit the ground. Last month? I asked. The sheriff nodded. You're not the first. They've been expanding their boundaries unofficially, trying to enforce rules on land they don't own. The HOA leader's expression went pale but defiant. We have documentation. No, you don't, he snapped. You have assumptions. And you're trespassing. Again. Mark folded his arms, watching them like a hawk. The sheriff continued, I'm giving you 1 minute to leave this property. If you return without legal authority, I will arrest you. This is not a negotiation. One of the men muttered. This isn't over. Actually, Mark said, it is. They glared, gathered their things, and left. Their tires spat gravel angrily as they sped away, but they were gone. The sheriff apologized, offered to file a formal trespass notice, and promised this wouldn't happen again. When he left, the farm felt like home again, but quieter. Like the ground itself needed a minute to settle after the disturbance. But the story didn't end there. 2 days later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. It was from the HOA.
A bill.
They were charging me $14,600 in violation fees for refusing access and modification denials. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. Mark was at the farm again when I showed him the letter. He shook his head and said, They're not giving up. So we don't either. You think they'll try something else?
I asked.
Oh, absolutely. People like them don't like losing. He was right. A week later, I returned from another supply run, only 4 hours this time, and found a group of the same HOA members standing in a tight circle on my property. But this time, they weren't taking pictures. They were setting up a temporary fence around my barn, as if they owned it. I pulled in fast, heart pounding. Before I even stepped out, they started yelling that I had no right to interfere. But they didn't see Mark. He came out from behind the barn. He had been working on a welding project for me, and walked straight toward them with that terrifying calm. The leader woman stepped back. You can't threaten us. No one's threatening you, he said. But you're trespassing. Again. She regained a bit of her false courage. We have the authority. No, Mark said, his voice low. You have arrogance. I stepped beside him. I told you before. This is my land. You don't get to act like you own it. The man with the tablet stepped closer. If you don't comply, we will take corrective. And then it happened. Mark didn't hit him, didn't shove him, didn't touch him. But he stepped so close that the man took 3 steps back without even realizing it. A complete involuntary reaction. He stumbled over the temporary fence post and fell backward into the dirt. Mark didn't move. Corrective action, he echoed. That it? The leader grabbed the tablet man by the arm. This is harassment. No, Mark said. This is accountability. That line would stick with me for the rest of my life. The sheriff was called again. And again, he forced the HOA off my land, issued citations, and warned them that the next time would be criminal. But the HOA didn't return. Not because they had given up, no. They were forced to. The sheriff filed an official report documenting repeated trespassing. I submitted the violation bill they had sent me. And when the county attorney reviewed the situation, the HOA received a cease and desist order for overstepping jurisdiction. Every fee they billed was invalid. Every claim erased. Every attempt documented as harassment. My land was officially sealed off from any HOA expansion attempts. A month later, I received a letter. This one wasn't a bill. It was an apology. Not sincere, but legally necessary. I read it once and tossed it in a drawer where I kept things that reminded me never to underestimate people with too much free time and too little humility. That night, Mark and I sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky. The warm glow stretched across the wheat fields, making them shimmer like waves. You didn't have to get involved, I told him. He shrugged. Friends help friends. Besides, I kinda enjoyed it. I laughed. I could tell. He leaned back. Tom, most people don't fight because they think they're alone. You weren't. I nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. Sometimes a man doesn't need a weapon to win a battle. He just needs someone who reminds him he's not standing alone. A month later, I expanded the farm, planted new orchards, repaired the barn, fixed the fencing. Every improvement was another reminder that my land, my family's home, was still ours. It felt like healing, like reclaiming the dignity the HOA tried to steal. Funny thing? The HOA never bothered me again. Maybe it was the citations. Maybe it was the sheriff. Or maybe it was the quiet understanding that some people and some lands are not meant to be bullied. Life calmed down. The seasons turned. The fields grew heavy with grain again. And every time I walked the property, I felt pride. Not because I had won against someone, but because I had protected what generations before me had built. But most importantly, because when I needed help, someone showed up. A Marine. A friend. A reminder that respect is earned, and boundaries matter. The land was safe. The lessons were permanent. And the story, well, sometimes life gives you battles you never asked for, but they teach you exactly who you are. And who stands with you.